Welcome to UPR Info's tutorial on the role of states under review at the Universal Periodic Review. This tutorial is aimed at all United Nations member states. Its purpose is to explain the role of states under review at the different stages of the UPR process. It is only an introduction to the UPR and needs to be completed with further readings. However, it will provide states sufficient knowledge to fully engage at the different stages. This tutorial consists of slides presenting different aspects and stages of states under review's engagement in the process and lasts for about half an hour. At the end, a small test will check their understanding of this tutorial. We hope you find this tutorial helpful, and in order to benefit from it, we encourage you to look at the tutorial we developed on the UPR modalities. States are key actors of the UPR process. Every United Nations member state is reviewed at the UPR and needs to be fully acquainted with its modalities. Participations at the UPR process require states to follow specific procedures, and this tutorial aims at training states under review for their meaningful and effective participation. The human rights situation of each country is based on 3 documents: the national report by the state under review, a compilation of UN information, and a summary of stakeholders' information.
The national report must describe the human rights situation in the country. It should include information about the developments since the last review and the implementation of the recommendations received, and the voluntary pledges made at the last review as well. The report should follow the general guidelines for the preparation of information under the Universal Periodic Review, contained in Decision 1719, adopted at the 17th session of the Human Rights Council in June 2011. The states are also encouraged to set up a broad national consultation with all relevant stakeholders. The Resolution 5.1, creating the Human Rights Council, mentions that the national report should not be longer than 20 pages. The national report needs to be sent to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, generally 12 weeks before the review, so it can be translated in time for the review.
In order to write this national report, states under review are encouraged to hold broad consultation process at the national level with all stakeholders. The aim of this national consultation is to collect from the civil society their views on the human rights situation in the country.
The national consultation should be inclusive, and the state under review should consult with the broad variety of stakeholders present in the country: the National Institution for Human Rights, civil society organizations, trade unions, lawyers group, local association, etc. These consultations should be held sufficiently in advance so that stakeholders can be consulted before starting the first draft and during the drafting process. Ideally, the first consultation should be held at least 1 year before the review. Consultations should take place not only in the capital but also in different regions of the country in order to hear the concerns of actors living in remote places and representing different communities with different priorities. The review of the human rights situation of each state takes place in a working group in Geneva, Switzerland, at the headquarters of the United Nations in Europe. Most states under review send representatives from the capital to present their human rights situation. For states with limited budget, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has set up a voluntary fund for participation to help them send a delegation to Geneva. According to the size of the country, the commitment to the process and the financial resources, countries send delegations of different sizes, from one representative to more than 30. During the first UPR cycle, 80% of the head of delegations were of ministerial level. Often, delegations include representatives from different ministers, human rights, justice, interior, etc., who are then given the floor during the review to respond to questions in their area of expertise. States can send written questions to the state under review before the review. These questions are then transmitted to the state under review by the Secretariat through the Troika a few days before the review. The state under review is expected to respond to these advanced questions during the review after introducing the national report. The review in the working group lasts 3 hours and a half. The country under review has 70 minutes and other states 140 minutes. The state under review can choose freely how to use these 70 minutes. The review starts with the presentation by the country under review of its national report and with the responses by the state under review to questions received in advance. It is advised not to make too long of a presentation of the national report, but rather to concentrate on the advanced questions and save time for the interactive dialogue. After the presentation of the national report and the response to advanced questions, begins an interactive dialogue between the state under review and the UN member states which registered to take the floor. During the first cycle, about 50 states were able to speak within the time limit of 120 minutes. At the second cycle, more time will be available, 140 minutes, and therefore more states will be given the floor. In their statements, countries ask questions and make recommendations. They make suggestions on how to improve the human rights situation in the country. They could also take the opportunity to share best practices. The state under review takes the floor during the interactive dialogue to respond. The state under review should try to respond to all questions and explain its policies in terms of human rights. Only recommendations made orally will be included in the report of the working group.
During the interactive dialogue, states makes recommendation to the states under review on suggestions on how to improve the human rights situation in the country.
According to the Human Rights Council Resolution 1621, the state under review should clearly communicate to the Council in a written format, preferably prior to the Council plenary, its positions on all received recommendations.
Allow me to state that initially there are recommendations which certainly warrant our acceptance. However, there are others which, given their constitutional and legal and indeed practical implications, have led us to defer acceptance so that we can think further about them before taking a position.
Those responses need to be clear in order to ensure an effective follow-up procedure. States should either accept or reject recommendations using phrases such as "this recommendation is accepted" and "this recommendation is rejected," and refrain from only taking note of them. Those responses